Welcome to the Joy Kwang Dai channel. In 2023, Donald Trump officially launched his third presidential campaign. And throughout the campaign, he always considered the 2024 race to be his final battle. He declared that in this war, there can be only one outcome: either the deep state will destroy America, or we ourselves must destroy the deep state. I am your warrior, I am your justice. And for those who have wronged and betrayed, I am your damnation. Deep state. Many people believe that he simply uses it as a tool to criticize anything that doesn't suit him. However, upon closer examination, we found that Trump is facing a truly powerful underground system. A corrupt state, holding absolute power and controlled by shadowy influential figures. Certain forces are seeking to dominate and manipulate critical issues not only for America but for the entire world. So then, who exactly is the force behind and controlling this underground organization? How terrified are they? What will Trump do to erase that? All will be revealed in today's video. The concept of an underground state appears to have taken clear shape during the 1960s. A time when power reached its towering peak. This was the period of confrontation between the United States and the Soviet Union. In a dangerous arms race where the nuclear threat is ever present. The world seems to be on the brink of collapse. Cuba occupies a strategically vital position, lying just off the coast of the United States, becoming the center of attention across America, because this strategy is being deployed right in the waters off the coast of the United States, becoming the epicenter of the conflict by choosing to side with the Soviet Union. At that time, the United States sought to occupy Cuba through diplomatic measures. And there were numerous attempts to assassinate Fidel Castro using a vast array of different methods. They are looking for an excuse to launch an invasion and eliminate all threats. In that context, the Soviet Union secretly moved nuclear weapons into Cuba. The United States was completely unaware of this action, until one day, an American reconnaissance plane flew past the island. And he had captured an extremely peculiar photograph. At first glance, the photo appears ordinary, nothing out of the ordinary. No different from any other field in Cuba. But when zoomed in, one can clearly see the tarps, trailers, and rocket launch systems. The US government immediately recognized the true importance of these photographs. Beneath those simple tents lay the most terrifying weapons of destruction on the planet. Ready to launch missiles right from America's backyard. The individual holding supreme power in Washington, D.C. at that time was President John Kennedy. Suddenly, I had to make the most difficult decisions of my career. Most advisors urged him to launch the invasion immediately within 3 days. However, Kennedy still wasn't truly convinced that it was the optimal solution. The special thing is, instead of staying up all night to handle urgent tasks, Kennedy got back in the car and continued on to another street to attend a campaign rally. He arrived at the home of Joe Anshop, a top influential journalist, at 7 o'clock. This very incident occurred at the Georgia Tower on the night before the nuclear war broke out. Why is that? Because at that party, there were people whom Kennedy trusted wholeheartedly. The real power brokers in Washington. At that time, this neighborhood was a gathering place for many powerful and influential figures. They were even neighbors, living just a few houses apart. A prime example is William Conby, who was then the CIA director for the Far East. Later, he became the highest-ranking leader of the entire organization. And Chip Bolin, former US ambassador to the Soviet Union. And Allen Dulles, the longest-serving director in CIA history. These characters live right in the Georgia Tower. Moreover, Frank Wisner, one of the first officers of the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA. He lives just a few houses down from me. Supreme Court Justice Felix Frankfurter also lived just a few minutes' walk away. Even John Kennedy himself once owned a house in this neighborhood. That fateful night, what brought Kennedy to the dinner at Georgia Tower? Because this is the true center of power in Washington. Not only the Parliament building, but also government offices. She is the owner of the houses in this neighborhood, where the nation's most important decisions are debated. Here, real power does not belong to those who are elected, belonging to individuals who are not publicly accountable, but they hold in their hands immense power, even an enormous secret. These men, long accustomed to power, are the very embodiment of a particular kind of authority. The American founders sought to control this power through a system of checks and balances. However, at the Georgia Tower, this power operated in a manner the Founding Fathers could scarcely have imagined. From a mysterious and shadowy government division, it gradually evolved into a true deep state. Outside the scope of official regulations, An underground state was operating very vigorously, even resorting to pressure and intelligence tactics without hesitation. To disrupt Congress, undermine the credibility of the US president, and achieve astonishing successes. The agents of this shadow government are not elected, yet they can challenge the will of the voters. Secret agendas are being independently advanced, beyond the control of democratically elected bodies. The intelligence community has become a powerful tool for this shadowy force. Even a practical businessman, often seen as astute, can easily be swept into this complex vortex. Of course, that question still remains. Can entities that have persisted through multiple government regimes truly put an end to their role? The somewhat bitter truth is that there is a group of people who continue to operate the government's work as administrations just come and go. Do these entities truly serve the nation, or are they merely protecting their own self-interests? First and foremost, we need to have a clear understanding of the nature and operational methods of intelligence agencies. Since the beginning of the 20th century, the primary purpose of intelligence agency operations has been to serve warfare. Upon entering the war, the United States established an international intelligence organization to gather information and effectively support military operations. However, when the war ended, these agencies were often downsized or even dissolved. The prevailing view at the time was that intelligence agencies required enormous resources and concentrated too much power in a small group of individuals who were not elected by the people. This was necessary during wartime, but became superfluous in peacetime. However, everything completely changed after World War II, particularly in the Pacific Theater. This war granted Roosevelt more power than ever before. One of his first decisions was to consult Wild Bill Donovan, a seasoned lawyer as well as a passionate and ambitious officer in the field of intelligence. Will emphasized a crucial point: if you decide to go to war, you must have an intelligence agency that operates effectively in wartime. And so Wild Bill Donovan became the head of the Office of Strategic Services, commonly known as the OSS. A centralized intelligence agency, granted supreme authority to undertake any necessary actions to ensure victory in the war. This is considered the origin of modern intelligence. Throughout its operation, no idea was ever considered too crazy for us. Wild Bill: I have instructed my scientists to explore every possible means to seize the initiative from the fascist forces. And in response, scientists devised countless cunning tactics, including explosive-laced sandwiches, incendiary bombs strapped to live rats, and truth serum to extract information from prisoners of war. And a special air freshener spray, used to eliminate the smell of feces. They also established shell companies to recruit personnel from the military, while enticing banks and film directors to participate in radio stations dedicated to spreading disinformation. The goal is to demoralize, sow division, and plunge the enemy into a state of chaos and disarray. Wild Bill: this house, currently valued at an estimated $17 million, is where Donovan would often gather with other powerful Washington power brokers to enjoy whiskey and discuss plans. He also leveraged these meetings to recruit new agents, laying the groundwork for the bold and innovative intelligence operations that would make history in the U.S. intelligence community. However, it should be noted that this type of intelligence agency only operated during wartime. When the war ended in 1945 and the Nazi forces surrendered, the OSS was disbanded. So the question arises: what should we do with weapons and technical equipment, OSS, in peacetime? President Truong Man affirmed that he does not want the United States to risk becoming a country with a political police force. In the context of having just defeated fascism, Jiang Min particularly emphasized that the United States did not need a secret intelligence agency, akin to the tool used by the Nazi regime to maintain its dictatorial rule. To protect democratic freedom, Truong Min acted in accordance with what he believed to be right, signing a decree to dissolve the OSS organization. Although Truong Man acknowledged that the OSS played an important role in helping to win the war, he also expressed concern that a small group of unelected officials, who hold top-secret information, wield excessive power. But now, returning the Dark God to the vessel had become an impossible task. Many key figures in the OSS, most of whom lived just 4 blocks apart in Georgetown, were at their core still products of the wartime culture. They attended evening parties at Sawa, discussing the future together and witnessing the international situation transform day by day. After a brief period of peace following World War II, tensions began to escalate between the two major powers, former allies in the war against Nazi Germany, the United States and the Soviet Union. U.S. senators warn that no one can know where a war will start or how it will end. When the Soviet Union came to power, it destroyed the independence and democratic systems of the Eastern and Central European countries. In that context, the former leaders of the OSS, most of whom still lived in Georgetown, began campaigning for the intelligence agency's revival. And so, the intelligence war entered a new phase, one defined by the Cold War. After World War II, the need for a centralized intelligence agency emerged to deal with the new global struggle against the Soviet Union. However, this issue has sparked considerable debate. A group of legislators warned that the Constitution was not written to grant too much power to those who operate in the shadows. They fear that this could lead to the formation of a shadow government run by corrupt officials. Nevertheless, her thoughts that afternoon had shifted. What prompted his change was the escalating tension and increasingly fierce confrontation with the Soviet Union. And shortly thereafter, the official documents were signed, leading to the establishment of the Central Intelligence Agency, abbreviated as CIA, under the provisions of the National Security Act. Late in the afternoon as he signed the bill, a lingering warning weighed on his mind: we must proceed with caution. But the threat of the Cold War overshadowed all those concerns. The CIA quickly became an effective instrument for the United States in global intelligence wars. The CIA's primary mission is to collect and analyze intelligence, while also carrying out other tasks to ensure national security. However, this vague wording essentially served as a blank check, allowing the CIA to conduct missions that no one wanted to put in writing. Young official charged under National Security Act, CIA launches series of covert operations. One of the most notable campaigns was the recruitment of Nazi German scientists after the war ended. This period lasted from 1945 to 1959. The United States sought to recruit Nazi German rocket experts to its side in order to develop missile capabilities and gain a competitive advantage in the arms race with the Soviet Union. Although justified as serving national security, these actions in fact ushered in an era of intelligence operations fraught with dark chapters. Far beyond anything President Truman could have imagined when he signed the order to establish the CIA. After World War II, the activities of the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, rapidly expanded into a series of highly controversial operations. The irony is that these operations frequently violated the very democratic values that the United States professed to defend. Some notable examples include: first, it was to protect the Nazi generals. The U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, once protected a general who had served under Nazi leader Hitler. This raises questions about the connection between the intelligence agency and figures who were once part of the opposing faction. Second is the intervention in the 1948 Italian election. The CIA directly intervened to weaken democracy in Italy, ensuring victory for the pro-American faction and thereby steering the country's politics to serve the interests of the United States. Third is the 1953 coup d'état in Iran. In collaboration with MI6, the CIA kidnapped the democratically elected Prime Minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, and returned power to Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. This is one of the clearest demonstrations that the intelligence agency served political interests rather than protecting democratic rights. In 1954, the CIA orchestrated a coup to overthrow Guatemalan President Jacobo Arbenz, who had implemented land reforms and was under heavy pressure from U.S. fruit companies. This is clear evidence that the CIA prioritizes the interests of American corporations over those of the host government. The U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, has carried out numerous political intervention campaigns, a prime example being its support for the coup in Congo in the early 1960s. And supported the overthrow of Chilean President Salvador Allende in 1973, leading to the establishment of a military dictatorship. And next is MKUltra, a mind control experimental program conducted by the CIA from the 1950s. The use of LSD and the conduct of unauthorized experiments on humans. Dozens of academic institutions in the US have joined the project with the aim of developing a serum or researching methods of mind control, causing psychological harm to many people. And what is even more heartbreaking is that in Vietnam, the CIA admitted to having killed over 20,000 people in an operation aimed at dismantling the communist network. This is a clear demonstration of wartime abuse of power. As for the media sector, the CIA is alleged to have manipulated American media agencies by using journalists to convey information in accordance with the agency's orientation. The incident has made a significant impact, attracting widespread attention and discussion from both domestic and international public opinion. In the realm of political control, the CIA exploited sensitive and potentially damaging personal information about its targets to intimidate lawmakers and prevent them from investigating this agency. For instance, Ang Lepton once surprised a feedback by accurately quoting his own words back to him. The night before, he had a conversation with his wife right there in bed. This demonstrates that the scope of this intelligence agency's surveillance is extremely vast and stringent. By the 1970s, the CIA had evolved into a powerful intelligence apparatus with substantial financial resources. The covert operation was conducted on a global scale. The leadership in this controversial campaign have raised concerns that this agency is no longer subject to oversight or control by democratic institutions. Instead, it operates as an entity outside the law. This event had a profound impact on global politics and shook the very foundations of American values. The knowledge held by individuals such as James Anglepton and Edward Hoover. They had mastered the use of secrets as a lever of power. President Kennedy understood this very well, particularly in his relationship with Hoover. The individual in possession of sensitive information has the potential to damage his career. This is precisely why Kennedy could not fire Hoover, no matter how much he wanted to. Most of the power during that period was in the hands of a small, unelected group of people. Many of them live in luxurious homes in the Georgetown area. They host parties in a Western style, from the decor to the overall atmosphere. But in reality, they pull the strings and run the Western world from behind the scenes. This is the very nightmare the American founders feared. Power is excessively concentrated, beyond the control of democratic mechanisms. Even President Harry Truman, who signed the order to establish the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, later expressed regret for his action. Assassination, that tragic event was still seared into the nation. In the Washington Post, Truman wrote an article calling for the dissolution of the CIA. Because that harmed America's historical reputation. He considered this a serious mistake, a turning point. Americans are gradually realizing that their government is going off track, particularly as the conflict in Vietnam grew increasingly protracted. The anti-war movement in the U.S. is increasingly expanding and growing stronger, while also demanding a powerful and robust accountability for the national security apparatus, which many believe has spiraled out of control. However, instead of listening, the U.S. government turned to surveilling its own citizens. The U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, launched Operation Charles, an activity alleged to be aimed at creating chaos. To infiltrate and monitor anti-war movements. President Lyndon B. Johnson even summoned Richard Helms, the director of the CIA, to verify whether this movement was secretly organized and directed by the Communist Party. After nearly a year of investigation, the CIA has returned with a conclusion. Even if North Vietnam and the Soviet Union sympathized with the anti-war movement, they had absolutely no control or sponsorship over it. This is entirely a spontaneous movement originating from the American people themselves. A natural reaction to what they perceive as government wrongdoing. Even within the CIA, many employees began to question the ethics of those actions. Some people even admit that they are monitoring their own families. We followed every footstep of our wives and children, silently reading news reports about the protests they attended. That is completely untrue. Some people worry that America is pushing itself into a state of division and extremism. They wondered, as a nation, what kind of people have we become? Based on the provided original text, there appears to be a typo. I will rewrite the passage to be as clear, fluent, and natural as possible, based on common expressions. Real power lies in the hands of individuals who are not elected by the people. They are not only spying worldwide, but also monitoring the American people themselves. In the mid-1970s, Senator Frank Church was the first person to dare to stand up to the CIA. He was the one who led the famous investigation known as the Judge Commit. Bring these shady practices to light in the public eye. For the first time, the American people witnessed and became acutely aware of the terrifyingly immense power of agencies like the CIA, the FBI, and the NSA. The Judge Committee's report indicates that statements have been taken from 8,000 witnesses. More than 10,000 classified documents have been released, shedding light on a series of conspiracies and covert operations. Beyond the assassination plots, they also discovered that the CIA had a type of pistol capable of firing poison-tipped darts. Almost completely silent, it was specifically developed for assassination missions. Additionally, they discovered that the CIA possessed an extremely detailed list documenting the entire activities, thoughts, and statements of the monitored individuals, including civil rights activists and other feminist activists. These actions constitute a serious violation of citizens' freedom. Furthermore, feminists uncovered another violation of civil liberties. Simultaneously, it exposes an extrajudicial system of operation, where secrets are used as tools for bribery and manipulation. Americans are realizing that their democracy is being threatened by the very institutions established to protect it. The Securities Commission's disclosures have revealed that excessive lack of transparency, coupled with lax oversight, created conditions for violations to occur. U.S. intelligence agencies have engaged in actions that run counter to democratic norms and values. This is not merely a warning about the danger of power operating without any checks and balances, and a powerful indictment of the failure of the oversight system in a democracy. Gentler and more mature than one ought to be. A clear demonstration of this is when Allen Dulles, the head of the CIA, wanted to get his agency's budget approved. You only need to bring a brief summary to present to the chairman of the Senate Military Committee and report. These are our goals for this year. Yes, here is the preliminary budget proposal for your company. But please do not tell us about the things you did there. The chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee provided the information. And so, all CIA operations proceeded without encountering any internal challenges. After the Trust Committee exposed the intelligence agency's abusive practices and shocking secrets, a series of new regulatory measures have been enacted. The establishment of oversight committees has opened up hope for a system with greater transparency and accountability. However, the CIA and intelligence agencies did not readily accept the change. Initially, they reacted very vehemently. Frank Trust, the chairman of the committee, has become the focus of criticism. Jim Englerton even spread the rumor that he himself was a KGB spy. The Soviet State Security Agency, commonly known as the Secret Police, was the force specifically responsible for domestic security and intelligence work of the Soviet government. The next step is the post-9/11 era. The United States has entered a new era, where national security is the top priority. Sometimes, subversion is carried out through civil liberties and the transparency of democracy. A series of newly implemented policies and programs have significantly expanded the powers of intelligence agencies. Unprecedented, yet it also opens up tremendous opportunities in terms of ethics and accountability. And the power control mechanism. Following the events of September 11, the power of intelligence agencies was significantly and substantially expanded. The CIA launched a retaliatory program and significantly expanded its surveillance scope without requiring court orders, recreating what James Angleton accomplished in Operation Charles, but on a far grander scale. This act was swiftly passed, authorizing intelligence agencies to deploy measures covertly, without a transparent mechanism or clear accountability. Millions of dollars have been invested in constructing new buildings, deploying new programs, and creating thousands of high-paying jobs. The Capitol has seen 22 new buildings emerge, housing numerous programs and vital secrets. Even the highest-level leaders cannot control everything. In 2013, Snowden revealed shocking information. Intelligence agencies had built and operated surveillance systems of an unprecedented scale and invasiveness. The U.S. government has conducted surveillance on its own citizens and citizens of other countries, in many cases even exceeding legally permitted limits. This raises concerns that the U.S. government is re-establishing a covert operational branch beyond the monitoring system of the tripartite model of government designed by the nation's founders. Overclassification of information, coupled with a culture of secrecy, has created an inflexible system. Power is concentrated in the hands of a few. The war on terror following the 9/11 attacks evokes the initial impulses of the Cold War era. A sense of urgency, fear, and a readiness to do whatever it takes to defend the fatherland. However, history has proven that the means are just as important as the ends. When the United States employs tactics similar to those of its adversaries, such as torture or warrantless mass surveillance, they not only damage their own reputation, but also undermine trust in democracy. Crises always make it easier to dismantle necessary barriers that were established to prevent the abuse of power. Yet these very limitations are necessary to ensure and maintain the nature of a free and democratic nation. Until Americans are truly willing to confront and implement profound and comprehensive reforms, this country will continue to face the risk of clandestine forces emerging beyond its control. The purpose of security can never justify measures that undermine democratic values, the very values that security is meant to protect. For these reasons, upon taking office in 2016, Trump officially declared the deep state to be real and launched a war against it. Over the past 8 years, the confrontation between Trump and the deep state has essentially been a battle fought without the use of strength or physical force. Trump lost the election, and now upon returning to the White House, he has once again declared war on it through his 10-point plan. First, I will immediately reinstate the executive order that I issued in 2020. I will restore the president's authority to dismiss incompetent officials, and I will exercise that power with the utmost restraint. Second, we will strictly handle all acts of corruption within the national security and intelligence forces. Many deserve such a fate. The ministries and agencies that have been armed will undergo comprehensive reorganization, so that anonymous officials can never target and mistreat conservatives. In our culture, this phrase is often translated with the implication of referring to people who have conservative ideologies. However, such a translation is inaccurate in its essence and prone to causing misunderstandings. Conservative, faithful to the U.S. Constitution, supporting a lean government and tax-cutting policies. Shrouded, Catholics are political opponents of the left-wing faction. What they are doing is extraordinary, far beyond what we ever thought possible. Third, we will restructure the entire FISA court system, which has become so corrupt it is thoroughly depraved. The judges did not seem particularly concerned about being misled in the apology requests. Many judges have had to handle countless lawsuits that they knew were wrongful, or at the very least, had to doubt the legitimacy of these claims. But they couldn't be bothered with matters of right and wrong, they had already accepted being deceived. The FISA courts are courts established under the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. In 1978, during President Carter's administration, these covert operations were largely unknown to the public. One of this agency's responsibilities is to review proposals for unauthorized surveillance and personal data collection, including monitoring activities. According to the owner of HHV, Mr. Trump was one of the many victims of this illegal wiretapping operation. Wednesday, it is necessary to purge the scams and abuses of power that are weakening America. We will establish a Truth and Reconciliation Committee to declassify and make public all documents regarding the state's espionage, censorship, and corruption activities. In reality, such documents are by no means uncommon. On Thursday, we will launch a large-scale campaign to strictly handle those who disseminate internal government information, colluding with sources of misinformation to